I've been there about 20 years. Part owner. So yeah, nice talking to you. Yeah, I guess.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the celebration of life ceremony for Mike. I'm Kim Kemerly. I'm Mike's second cousin. Our dads were first cousins, and we were really best friends. We lived together as roommates for about 5 years back in the 80s, and then went kind of our separate ways, but we always maintained contact, although there were times when we went a year or two without talking. Just that was Mike. He liked to maintain his privacy. So anyway, let me say there are restrooms, or there is a restroom around here if anybody needs to go. And there's pizza back here, obviously, everybody smells that. And I think somebody else is going to come up first.
Hi everyone, welcome again. Thank you for being here to honor Mike and to support our family. I'm Bethany Stewart. I am Deb's daughter and Mike's niece. And we just want to open again with a thank you and the reading of his obituary. For those of you who maybe haven't seen Mike for a while and just want a glimpse into his life. Lifelong Fortville resident Michael Lee Kemerly was born to Paul and Virginia Kemerly on April 21st, 1953, and passed away on December 22nd, 2023. Like his allegiance to his hometown, Mike demonstrated the same loyalty in other major parts of his life, his relationships with his family and friends, and his love of culture and the arts. As the firstborn and only son, Mike inherited the gentle spirit and kind hearts of his parents. Early on, he developed a close relationship with both his mother and his maternal grandmother, Helen Garris, with whom they lived while his father was serving overseas in the United States Army during the Korean War. Even after his parents purchased their own home when Paul returned, Mike continued to love spending Sunday afternoons at Grandma Garris's farmstead. He and his cousins played in the barn hayloft and enjoyed the sugar cookies his grandma always had prepared for her grandchildren. Mike became the older brother of Vicki, Deborah, and Jennifer, and fostered a love of music and sports through childhood and adolescence. He played baseball as a young boy and faithfully supported the Cincinnati Reds. As he aged, he played a variety of musical instruments and built a robust record collection. After graduating from Mount Vernon High School in 1971, Mike worked at General Motors Allison Transmission in Indianapolis for over 30 years. His tight-knit friendships from both school and the workplace followed Mike throughout the rest of his life. Outside of work, Mike dedicated his time to cheering on his favorite sports teams, the Cincinnati Reds, the Boston Celtics, and the Green Bay Packers, enjoying a variety of comedians, including the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers, David Letterman, and Bob and Tom, experiencing the arts by seeing Broadway shows on trips to New York City, and making his rich inner world known through writing and cartooning. Mike wrote the humor columns Codes, Pearls, and Kemerly's Corner, which the Fortville Tribune featured for nearly a decade. Mike's passions translated easily into his love for his family and friends, whether that included taking his mother or nephew on a trip to New York or Cincinnati, gifting experiences to his siblings and their families, or attending his nieces and nephews' sporting and musical or theater events. He will be remembered for his sense of humor, his encouragement of his family's endeavors, and his delight in his great nephew's love of trains.
And you wrote that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking here. I'll try not to bore anybody, but I'm going to tell a lot of stories about Mike. And if anybody has anything at any time to chip in, because I'm sure some things I'll have to say probably will spark memories in some of you, then feel free to jump in. It's not just me up here. Mike always said that I was kind of like the younger brother that he ever had. And recently, Jennifer told me that he always kind of ribbed her about when she came along, he was hoping for a brother, and he was so disappointed. So I guess I maybe took a little bit of the heat off her and filled that role. So glad to do it. Yeah. I'm going to do a lot of name dropping today, and hope you may pick up on some of them. Some of them you may not recognize. But one thing you'll ask me, and I know people are wondering about, and I always wondered about it, is where the nickname Toad came from. And I can't give you a great answer, but what he told me was in junior high, there was a group of one clique that was the Thieves, and the others were the Toads. And he was the leader of the Toads, so he became tagged with the nickname Toad. So, for whatever that's worth. My first couple of memories of life were, I remember in second grade, I got this book, and I wasn't a very good reader apparently at that time, because I thought the book was called So You Want to Be a Magician. And I saw Mike standing on the corner after I came out of the Carnegie Public Library here in Fortville on Main Street. And I told him, I got this book, I want to be, so you want to be a magician? He said, maybe you could find some tricks in there to play on our cousin Daryl. So, typical Mike, even in those days. And I remember early on being up in his room at his parents' house, and Debbie was up there, and there was an old TV show called The Joe Pine Show, where they'd have a bright box and somebody come up and give complaints. And Debbie took that role, and her name on the show, I'm sure Mike came up with this, was Mrs. Toe Jam. And surprisingly enough, in recent years, Jennifer has a couple of twins that she looks after there at the flower shop, and Mike dubbed himself to them Mike Stinky Toes. So apparently that was still an ongoing source of humor for him. I know in recent years, he, you know, a lot of times when he'd eat out, he'd eat at Montana Mike's, and he liked Jersey Mike's. He said he was only going to eat at places with Mike in the neighborhood. So, I'm going to tell a story here that it's crazy, but we always talked about this over the years. One time we were in his car, in his Camaro, and we were headed out towards Strauss. I was 13, and this big dog, and you know, Camaro sits pretty low to the ground. This big dog ran right out in front of us, and there was no way we could avoid it. And we both kind of braced for the impact, and there wasn't any impact. We looked around, you know, for a dog rolling around, it vanished. To this day, I have no idea. And, you know, we always, I mean, if there was ever a supernatural experience in my life, that was it. And we were, I mean, we were sober, you know, there wasn't anything going on there. So, funny thing, back in the 70s, people thought Mike looked a lot like Elton John. And especially if there was an album cover called Honky Chateau, and Elton John had a beard on that one, and Mike had a beard. We went on this trip to Canada across Lake Erie on a ferry boat, one day trip, and Scott, your brother, was with us, our cousin Daryl. Only time Mike was around the U.S. And anyway, coming back, somehow the rumor spread that Elton John was on his boat. And Mike, dude, there was a line of probably 25 kids that lined up to get his autograph, and he signed every one of them. And Lisa's brother, Scott, was with us, Scott Mills, and Scott said he was the manager. He lied to Mike. And finally, some guy came up to Mike and said something about, you know, aren't you getting tired of signing these autographs? And he called it Mr. Elton John, and Mike said, I'm not Elton John. You're not. The guy was flabbergasted. He had no idea. So he faked a lot of people out that day. You know, Poe loved, and I'm going to say Poe as much as Mike, because that's what everybody called him. He loved Jewish humor, especially sarcasm. You know, when something wasn't suiting him, great, okay, fine. Those were favorite expressions. And he liked insults and outrageous humor. And gross out and sick humor, I don't think were favorites. If any of you have ever seen the movie Monty Python's Meaning of Life, there's a scene with a character named Mr. Creosote who probably weighs 600 pounds. And I hope I don't gross anybody out here without pizza. But anyway, he goes into this fancy French restaurant, and they keep feeding him until finally he explodes in the contents of his stomach. are all over everybody and everything in the room, and that was a favorite one of Mike's. So, and he also liked in the movie Serial Mom, which is John Waters' movie, somebody sneezed on the back of somebody else's neck, and that was ultimate humor for him. He was very much an authority on obscure character actors, old movies, old TV shows. And see Stan nodding his head and so on. One time he went to see Jerry Mathers, who was Leave It to Beaver, who was in Indianapolis, and he was signing autographs, and Mike arranged to get an interview with him for the Fortville Tribune, because Mike was writing for the Tribune at that time. And so Mike stood there as Jerry Mathers was signing autographs, and Mike was telling him about different episodes that he'd been in. And finally somebody came along and asked about a specific episode, and Jerry Mathers said, "I really don't remember. Ask this guy, he knows it all." And, Mike was, without question, the funniest, probably most creative individual, Mike no nodding, of anybody that I've ever met. I don't know, maybe some of it came from his being a left-hander, because he kind of saw the world through a little different lens. He also, he was likely to say anything. His very unfiltered. And the thing was, I guess maybe because of his short stature and just because he was so funny, he got away with it. Yeah. And nobody else could, some of the things that he said. One of the best compliments he got, he went to this, in Chicago, they had a reunion of Second City alumni, the comedy troupe, and a guy named Joe Flaherty. That name probably doesn't mean anything to anybody here, but he was part of the SCTV with John Candy and Catherine O'Hara, who was the mother in the Home Alone movie, so same group. Joe Flaherty was talking to Mike, and he said, "You're so funny, you're a scary guy." And Mike had the autograph that says, "You're a scary guy, Joe Flaherty." One time Mike did some stand-up comedy, and with mixed results. And part of it wasn't his fault. I mean, I know one time I saw him kind of bomb here in Fortville at an outdoor event, and it just wasn't a good venue for comedy. But he was very funny one night out on the west side of Indianapolis, a place I think was called Damon's. And it was in the month of May, and he's doing this shtick, and I look around and I know he saw the person too, but there in the audience laughing at him was Mario Andretti. So that was pretty cool. He always credited his dad with a sense of humor, but he was definitely influenced by the comedies and sitcoms he watched growing up. I'm going to give you just a little taste of what Mike was like, some of his likes and dislikes. He loved the old Universal monster movies, with the exception of The Mummy, and I know that's a time that loved a lot of those too. He loved Neil Simon, The Sunshine Boys, The Odd Couple, the playwright David Mamet. He loved Christopher Guest movies, especially Fred Willard. George Grizzard was a favorite author, and Monty Python, Gilbert Gottfried, W.C. Fields, Dennis Wolfberg, Laurel and Hardy. And he loved women that weren't particularly attractive, that could poke fun at themselves. If you remember Mary Grace Canfield, who was Ralph Monroe on Green Acres, he always said he would love to have met her and talked to her. And I'll kind of stop there at some of the things that he liked. But he didn't like Sven Booley, the horror host.
But he would watch it.
He would watch it, but he would probably not like Sven Booley.
Yeah.
He didn't like his humor.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't like Helen Reddy. Surprisingly, you might be surprised at this, he didn't like most jokes. He thought jokes were pretty lame. There were a couple he told him, I can't tell them, but for the most part, he just didn't like jokes. And he didn't like physical work. And
I'll attest to that.
And there were a couple of things, that was a great obituary, he did a great job. A couple of little minor things I would say, you mentioned, and I know this is given to you probably by Jennifer or somebody, he liked Bob and Tom as a vehicle for getting his work out there, but he wasn't a real big, I doubt if I asked him, could you name one thing that Bob and Tom ever said that you laughed at? He probably wouldn't have come up with anything. But he liked some of the people that were on their show. And the other thing, I think, you said you worked at Allison's for 30-some years. He was employed there. And before he worked at Allison's, he worked like his dad, Paul, who was employed part-time at Grady's IGA here in town, Grady and Madeline Ard. And Mike called them the Ard couple. They had a daughter, Judy, and one time Judy was sitting on up by the register, they'd have the conveyor where you slide the groceries down. And Mike turned that big finger on her seated there, and she fell off and ran into a riot act. And I'm surprised he kept his job. But that was Mike. Let's see. Oh yeah, and the other thing, I don't know how he kept his job at Allison's because he was never there. And I would tell him sometimes he'd be off for like 2 weeks in a row, and I'd say, "Aren't you going to go to work tomorrow?" "No, I got to show up who's boss." And that was a refrain I heard time and time again. Also, Stan could probably speak to this, but I know he gave people a hard time at Allison's, and they gave him a hard time. And I'm going to come back to this, but he was very self-conscious early on, especially about losing his hair at an early age. And you probably never saw him without a Reds cap or a Celtics cap. And I think somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, Vicki, that you hadn't seen him without a cap maybe until your mother's funeral. I mean, is that kind of... Yeah. So, anyway, people at work, I understand, would come up behind him and take his cap to infuriate him, and then he would get them back. And there was one woman, I don't even know her name, but he called her a whale lady for, I guess, obvious reasons. And he caught up with her in the break room one day, and he told her she needed to be really careful because the local scuba shop was having a sale on harpoons. And her response was, "Please, not while I'm eating." And he said, "Boy, that really leaves me a lot of time." So, Mike was a technophobe, I would say. He didn't like technology. He never had a cell phone. Never texted in his life or received a text. In fact, the phone that he had was a piece of crap because Tanya, you probably know, I know I'd be on the phone with him and cut out. He was telling me about ordering from Monty's Pizza, and all of a sudden he could hear them saying, "Mr. Kemerly, Mr. Kemerly, Mr. Kemerly." He couldn't be heard. Also, now we know he didn't like technology, but if they had anti-social media, he would have been a big part of that. And he didn't like being around people as a rule. And so many times I heard your mother say, he says it makes him nervous being around people. So unpredictability was the key. I mean, whether it was work or anything, we never knew whether he was going to show up. And I remember back in high school, we played wiffle ball and basketball, and my other cousins would be upset because at the last minute he would bow out and say he didn't feel good or something. So, so what happened eventually, and I see Reggie back there, this story is about Reggie. One time, he was supposed, you can maybe fill me in on the details, but he was supposed to go to a Purdue football game with Reggie, I think, and some of his friends on a Saturday, and they went to his apartment, knocked on the door, he didn't come to the door, and they knew he was in there. So, Reggie went to the neighbor's house, or somebody went to the neighbor's house and got a key, and they got him out and kidnapped him and took him to the game.
He was so mad.
Not only was he mad at the time, even...
Because it was Lawrence McConnell, and he the key to Richie.
Yeah.
Mom was so mad.
Well, since you were the cover of who it was, I
No, sorry.
That's okay. But that's
Well,
okay.
they're dead.
But anyway, so,
My grandma and grandpa's apartment.
yes.
So why they gave the Lawrence McConnell a key, I don't know.
But anyway, so later on, a few years later, there was some kind of a class reunion or something where some of Mike's classmates threatened to come and kidnap him to take him to the reunion. Well, he wasn't having part of that, so he headed to Cincinnati for the weekend. Anyway, again, back to the baldness. You know, that was, I remember the first time he became aware of just how self-conscious he was we were with our cousin Dwight at a basketball game, and Dwight says, "Why does Mike always have to go to the bathroom right before the game?" And I said, "He doesn't have to go to the bathroom because he doesn't want to take he's going to take the cap off. He doesn't want to reveal." But finally, when Mike realized he could parlay that into humor, then the hat came off. And he did that on Bob and Tom. That was his first appearance. He appeared as the anonymous bald guy. And that was such a hit, they brought him back on, and he brought 6 of his bald friends on. And I was his attorney. And no, maybe there was one funny thing they said, because Bob Kagoyan, when the bald guys walked in, he said, "Hey, can you turn down the lights in here?" That's right. Anyway, insult humor. I told you about Whale Woman. One time we were in Bundy's pharmacy, and I think it was one of his old teachers, so it might have been Bulldog Heidi, or it might have been this substitute teacher he called Scarecrow Wilson. But one of them came in, and Mike was talking to the girl at the register, and he said, "That was my teacher a long time ago." And she said, "Well, time flies." And Mike said, "So does she on her broomstick." I'm going to tell a couple of stories here that I hope don't offend anybody, but Mike, there was a time about a dozen years ago where, not too bad, but where he hung out at Hooters and was there not every day, and he got to know, and again, he was no threat to the girls, so he became very popular, and he actually referred to himself as Poe Hefner because the two was together. And anyway, 2 guys from Fortville came in, and he had a couple of girls draped over his shoulder, and Mike said to them, "How are you guys doing?" And they said, "Not as well as you." And I'll skip that story just because it's a little out there. Anyway, Tonya, you were, everybody want to hear more stories?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, this was one you and Jackie were involved with. I don't know if you've been to like a late night drive-in movie or something, but you were coming back on 36 by Shenandoah High School. You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
And the marching band was out on the parking lot. And Mike drove off 36 and slow motion, but he, like a OJ drive, but he drove through the band and made it.
We went to a lot of all-night movies.
Yes.
And then
Dusk to Dawn.
Yeah, Dusk to Dawn movies.
So, one time we were in Cincinnati, and this could only happen to Mike, and this woman came up to him and she said she was a witch. And telling him all about witchcraft. And Mike said, "Yeah." He said, "Look at what it's done to me." And she said, "Oh, yeah."
Now, I don't know if anybody does that in hamburger
No.
either.
You want to?
Yeah, I don't
You don't need the mic,
that.
okay.
Okay. In high school, there was a little restaurant called Scotty's uptown. It's not there anymore. It's where, what's there now?
It was like a White
Where
Castle.
Yeah, it was like a White Castle. Well, at the time, I was kind of like the manager. Mike came every night. He would come every night and beat on the gum machine, and there'd just be packed with people, and he'd be beating on the gum machine. He'd put in a quarter, and he'd go, "Yellow, yellow." He would do stuff like that, and he had Glenda Chapel Pruitt laughing so hard that she actually wet her pants at work. Because he would have her laughing. then one night, I don't know if you were there, David, or not, but we had the hamburger eating contest. Did you
I remember
come up there?
hamburgers there. I remember him trying to teach Linda how to say the word hamburger.
Yeah, well,
He said, no, it's not hamburger, it's hamburger.
It was-
Hamburger,
yeah,
no, it's
hamburger.
hamburger.
Yeah.
Hamburger, no, hamburger.
Well, him and Johnny
Took a while.
Swartz had a hamburger eating contest to see who could eat the most hamburgers. And Mike ate 24 hamburgers in 10 minutes. And he ran around, and any of you that know him, how he would go like this, you know, like he was the prize fighter. And he did that for weeks in school, running around going, I'm the winner, I'm the winner, for John Pugh.
He did that a lot.
Yeah.
In elementary school.
But, I mean, how we even got away with this stuff, don't ask me. Because we just gave him these hamburgers free, you know. But he'd come every night, just about, when we were working.
I remember, you know, he would do almost anything for a laugh, and I remember one time we were in Marsh in Greenfield, and he'd already paid, he didn't already check out, and I was standing up there with the guy at the counter, and all of a sudden, at the end of the aisle there, he starts making chicken noise, like, and I almost, you know, I'm laughing, and the girls just looking like, what's wrong with me?
Oh, yeah, he loved to make you laugh when you were trying to talk to somebody about something, you know, serious. Yeah, and he'd be behind you going, I'm making all kind of faces. And even he did this when we went to the movie in school one time, and Miss Sanford,
Judy Sanford.
she told him, she said, Mike, you have to behave. You have to behave
That's the wrong
in
thing
here.
to tell him.
You know, this is a serious movie with Romeo and Juliet, something like that. You know, well, then later on, she got so bored, she goes, hey, go ahead. Do your faces, we need some laughter. You know?
Well, do you remember, he used to make Miss Sanford laugh with his weird walk.
Yeah, that's what she wanted him to do. She wanted to wear hunch up his shoulders and do that walk.
Well, there were,
No.
Mike told me there were, you know, there were only 2 times in his life that he could ever remember that Paul didn't back Virginia on something. And they both involved him, of course. And one of them was, he called into some radio show at WIBC, talk show, and this was back, you know, in the 70s when driver ed was in the summer and so forth. And he told them, as a suggestion, he said, you know, I think schools should have driver ed all year round so that people would get the experience of driving in adverse conditions and so forth. And they said, well, you know, that's something interesting, we'll take that up. He said, oh, one more thing. Quack, quack, quack. And one of his friends was listening and said, the first quack made it, and then it just went to music. So it's a time glide.
And your mom would always say, you wasn't raised this way.
Yeah. So I didn't raise him like that.
Yeah, I didn't raise him like that, yeah. She'd look at me differently.
So she said she was gonna tell his dad, when his dad got home, he just laughed. And then the other one was, when he was on the Bob and Tom show, he played this a magician called Ho David Gray. And he had a couple of girls with him, and they were his assistants, La and Da. And he was gonna do card tricks, which obviously he didn't know any card tricks, but he fumbled the cards, and La and Da are laughing at him, and they're saying, this ain't a real magician. He says, oh yeah, I'll show him magic. So he says, watch this, girls. Snaps a finger. First girl's top comes off, she's in a bikini top. Second girl, same thing. Back to the first girl, she's in bikini bottoms. Same thing with the second girl. And then he says, okay, now for the coup de grace, that's how he said it. And he snaps his fingers and he's holding the bikinis. Of course, they're nowhere to be found. But anyway, his mom was watching that. He told her to watch it. And she started screaming. And she woke up, Paul, and he just started laughing. He thought it was great. So, cool. Luann, should I tell the story about the time you went to the?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, how old were you? Early 20s or something?
Early 20s.
And she had correct me on the details of my brother, it was a Volkswagen with a terrible paint job from the
Yes, from the
beginning.
factory.
And so they told her to go get 3 estimates, and she, being a young woman, she didn't want to go by herself, so she grabbed his bike to go and buy them. So, I don't, did you go to one place that you knew
That was reputable. I think so,
Reputable,
and then
okay.
I needed
And
another
then
one.
we needed another one, and they went to the first place they saw in Indianapolis
It was
called
on Washington Street, and it was called the Body
the
Shop.
Body Shop. So they pull in there, and they walk inside, and there's some half-naked Hispanic guy coming toward Mike.
Well, no, I better tell this.
Okay.
I go in, and I look, and it's like a ticket counter thing, and there's a list of things they offer, and all of a sudden I hear the door behind me click, and I thought, well, and I'm registering what's going on here, and it's not, I'm not gonna get an estimate. And code is nowhere to be found. And I scramble out, he's doubled over, and I said, why did you leave me? And I said, you know, I could have gotten hurt in there. And he's like, no, I could have gotten hurt. And so anyway, yeah, it's crazy.
Well, Kim, I was just going to say something when you were talking about how he liked to make people laugh. When I was in junior high, I had an accident where I fell on my head, and I was in the hospital for like 9 days. And for as odd as Pode could be in certain ways, reclusive, he was over at the hospital visiting me every day, which meant a lot to me. I mean, he and our whole family, when our dad died,
Right.
Pode became kind of like a big brother to us. He'd come over and do things with the girls. And Jeff Davis was just in here, and he was saying how you and Kim, Pode and Kim would take us to things that a lot of guys wouldn't want a kid tagging along with. But, you know, he was real good about that. But anyway, to go back to my story, he would come over and visit me every day in the hospital. And I had a male nurse that was there. And of course, that's going to be a strike right away with Pode. And this guy was kind of odd anyway. But this guy would be talking to me, telling me things, you know, serious things, and Pode would be in the background making faces. And here I'm a 13-year-old boy trying to keep a straight face in front of this male nurse, and it was comical, but I had to share that. Yeah. It's been a few years ago. Yeah.
Hey, can I say something about the name Pode? I worked at Allison's with Mike for 20 years, 22 years. And when I first met him, everybody at Allison called him Pud. Nobody called him Pode. Nobody called him Mike. And I asked him one day, how'd you get the nickname Pud? And he said, when I first started at Allison's, I had a gas station shirt on that said Pode. But the guys I'd worked with thought it said Pud, and they called me Pud. And I never corrected them. And when he died, when I got the news he had died, I texted 5 or 6 people and told them, and 4 of them had to text me back and ask me what his name was. Not one of them knew his name was Mike Kemerly. All anybody ever knew as was Pud. And then when I thought it was odd that he wouldn't correct anybody. But he never did. Never corrected anybody, said, no, it's Pud. Not, everybody else was called him Pud. And most didn't even know his name was Mike.
Maybe he wasn't there enough.
Well, he was. That's true. All that's true about his employment.
You have the fight in there anywhere, that he
No.
did Mark
No, I
Collins
don't.
did at
At
Rick's
Rick Myers.
Myers Barn. You tell about the fight, you know better than me.
Oh, gosh. I don't know where it came up, but he and Collins in the hallway would like fake like they were gonna go at it all the time, so finally we said something, and we were getting ready to lay the sod for the new football field at the high school. And so anyway, we charged admission to the fight and gave the proceeds for the football fund. But anyway, but Mike, I think, thought they were just gonna jab and kind
play.
of, you know, have fun and stuff. And he wore like long pants, and we're in one of our bathrooms. I got scissors cutting it to make shorts, because Collins came like with the gym shorts, and he came out wailing at Mike.
He got it, 'cause all those girls started beating on Mark because he made Mike bleed. He also was like me, Pat Brown, and Glenda.
It was a big deal for a while there. I mean, everybody, and people were parking in our barn lot, and
there's
stuff.
so much
It was a big
people there.
crowd, but it's like, I think Pode thought it was just gonna be, you know, we're gonna
Exhibition.
exhibition. And Collins took it seriously. He was just wailing on it from the get-go. It's like, ah, come on, Mark. Anyway.
You know, Mike and I went to see Rodney Dangerfield at Butler University. It was what was sometimes Starlight Musicals. This was the 14th round outdoor venue. And Mike had this little brownie camera, didn't amount to much, but he went up by the stage, left our seats, and he started taking snapshots with a flash. Rodney Dangerfield went berserk and says, "Where are the H's of the security in this brick SHIT house?" And anyway, Mike ditched the camera, and then he says, he saw Mike with his hat, he said, "Oh, you're security, good you're here." And let's see, what else?
I remember, I'm David Anderson. I graduated with Mike, and we were friends in high school as well after graduation. And there was one class we had together in high school. I don't remember what it was. But Mike, the night before, was sitting in his room with no radio on or anything, and he was just reading a book, and he had a cassette player. And the cassette tapes, if you remember, were 45 minutes long on a side, where our class times were 40 minutes. Well, the night before, he was sitting in his room, and he turned on the cassette recorder, and he was just reading a book, and he would just lean into that recorder and yell, "Hey!" Just go back reading his book. A few minutes later, go, "Hey!" Go back reading his book. He might have even thrown in one of his famous "Yellow!" But that's the correct pronunciation, just to let you know. And he did that for the whole 40 minutes. And his locker was right outside the classroom door. So just before we walked into class, he hit play and closed his locker. So a few minutes into class, we hear this, "Hey!" out in the hall. Teacher run out and look up and down, and there's no one there. Go back in the room, and a few minutes later, "Hey!" Ran back out there, and we were rolling. We were rolling in our seats, and nobody else knew what the heck was going on. You had that teacher running back and forth to an empty hallway the whole period, but you know, it just made me remember that one.
He used to do that at the library. I don't know if anybody remembers Mr. Gray in the library.
Yeah, I had a story
Oh,
there.
God. Okay, I'll let you tell.
Oh, well, and Gary Gray actually turned out his mother was a Kemerly, so he's a distant relative. I didn't know that, we didn't know that, but anyway, and he said something disparaging to Gary Gray in the library, and Paul Hansen, it was within earshot of him. Paul Hansen says, "All right, get up." "What?" "Get up, dumb butt." And Mike says, "Why, you want my seat?"
He used to go to the library and yell like that,
Right.
but from the library.
Yes, couldn't tell, yeah.
We used to gulp our lunch to get down there to
To
watch.
find out
yeah,
what-
to watch the presentation, yeah.
Little racy story, or not too bad, but anyway, we used to hang out at Jim Dandy at Greenfield, and that was our favorite hangout. And one time, there were these two flies that just kept bugging us, flying around, and finally they landed on the table next to us. And somebody decided these flies were more than buddy, because they had something going on. And Mike said, "Yeah," he said, "I can hear them moaning." And he didn't plan for this to happen at all, but there was a 70-ish-year-old couple seated there, and we could see their shoulders shaking. And Mike was kind of embarrassed, and then they looked over at us, and they were nodding, laughing, so it didn't offend them.
Hey, Kim,
Yeah.
for one thing, 70's not old, so don't.
I know.
Anybody that remembers Hode, when he would team up with Tom Miller,
Oh, God.
that was the extreme. All these stories are
That's who used to
hilarious,
go to the library.
but you put them two, I went to the library with them several times just because I would never have a book with me or never check out a book, but we would go down and those two were crazy, and it'd be, all right, you guys are out of here, go on. Tom was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, Tom.
that's who went to, at lunchtime.
Yeah, lunchtime, down to the library, yeah. Exactly.
Remember, just crazy stuff, a couple more stories here, but he and our cousin Dwight used to keep books for the Mount Vernon football team and be on the sideline, and one night, they're out there on a Friday night, there's full moon, Dwight says, "Full moon out tonight, Wolfman's gonna be out." Mike says, "Yeah, he's gonna get you, you stupid man." Which, I mean, Dwight just came to expect that, you know, joking. One time we were in Bundy's, and Mike said something about Mrs. Bliss, and this guy, kind of silly looking guy, walks in and says, "Meet Mr. Bliss." Of course, the guy was oblivious to what we were talking about. I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here, and then I'll kind of wind up. But, some of you, Richie and people that I've associated with, know about crabbing, repeating, and that was the thing that started in the '60s, and we joked and said 50 years from now we'll be doing this. And yeah, and it went beyond all extremes, and it got, instead of just being verbal, it would become nonverbal too, because there was this old, some of you are old enough to remember Ernie Kovacs, comedian, and he had this character named Percy Dovetonsils, and we always picked out resemblances of people. We saw this guy, Jim Denny, looked like Percy Dovetonsils, so I looked away, and then after I said Dovetonsils, Mike's, "Coo, coo, coo." And one time I told him my family was staying in Teaneck, New Jersey, and again I look away, and then I look back, and he's got the cup of tea up to, or glass of tea up to his neck, and I got him back though, because he mentioned something about cold turkey, and I went, "Ooh, gobble, gobble, gobble." So that was our little thing there. But a few, just name dropping here real quick. We went to there were two writers from Saturday Night Live from the early years, it was like the third year, and we went to see them at Butler, and Mike mentioned from a show a couple of weeks before, hosted by, of all people, O.J. Simpson, and we thought that was probably the best episode of the year, and Mike mentioned these two skits that he thought were the best, and one of them was somebody playing Babe Ruth to this dying little boy, and the other one was Saturday Night Fever, but Samurai Night Fever with John Belushi. Some of you remember that. And Mike said, "I particularly like those two." And the one writer, Alan Zweibel, says, "Well, thank you." He said, "I wrote both of them." And he was the guy that with Gilda Radner created a lot of her characters, like Roseanne, and Anna, and so forth.
Can I say a couple?
Yeah.
I just want to say a couple of things, like, from working with him. I didn't know him when he was young, like you guys said. But he would call me and ask me to go places with him just because he didn't want to go by himself, I guess. He called me and we went and saw Stephen Wright, the comedian, one time. And when it was over, he stood out at the back door waiting on him and ran to the bus and waited to talk to him. And then, I don't know whether he got he got something from Stephen Wright. I don't remember what it was. But then he went and saw him again in Cincinnati. And Stephen Wright actually said something to him about, "Are you following me, or what? I just saw you in Indianapolis. You were at my bus." And he would wait for people like that just to talk to them. And something on where you said like obscure stuff. He asked me probably 2001. We went to Gen Con. He called me and said, "Will you go to Gen Con with me?" And I said, "Yes." We went to Gen Con. All he wanted was to meet David Carradine. David Carradine was there that year, and I think he died about 2 years later. But David Carradine was there because Kill Bill was out. And of course he was on Kung Fu. But Mike wanted to talk to him about a movie where he played Arlo Guthrie. And when he brought that up to David Carradine, he opened up his case, he told his assistant, "Get in my case, I've got a picture from that movie." And he autographed it and gave it to Mike and didn't charge him. Believe me, those celebrities charge for everything. A picture with them, a picture of them. And he didn't charge Mike for that because it was something that he's probably the only person at Gen Con that would have brought up that movie. And he autographed it and just handed it to him, and he talked to him for a little while. But he just liked to see people like that, and talking about things that everybody else wasn't talking about. And I love going places with him. We went several places, and at work, I just say one thing he told this guy, it's not real risque, but there was a guy that he loved to tease him. And he went up to him one day and he said, he called everybody else brother. "Brother, if you die before me, I'm going to put an obituary. You're survived by your longtime companion Bruce, and send all donations to the Little Red Door." And man, that guy said, "F you, Pud, F you, Pud." Then he told him he was going to marry his 13-year-old daughter when she turned 18, so that this guy could be his father-in-law. just to dig at him.
Maybe I'll tell, this is a story I've debated telling, but I guess I will. one time in Hooters, he was good friends, and I heard it secondhand, I wasn't there, but he said there was one gal he was close to, and a new gal came in and sat down with him. And Mike says, yeah, I'm her grandfather. And said, in fact, she's my favorite granddaughter because she lets me rub hot oil all over her body. And the new girl shot off like she was going to be sick. And they just rolled and rolled. Anyway, again,
He's the only guy I ever went to Hooters with that I ever saw girls hanging on. They would sit on his lap. They would put their arms around his neck. I mean, you know, usually you go in there, they don't like that.
no.
He's the only guy I ever saw the girls would do that with. And he'd sit there and just sip on a beer for a long time, maybe drink 2 beers. Wasn't like he was spending tons of money.
Right. A couple of quick stories, and I'm going to try to wind up here. You mentioned about going to see different people. We went to see Paul Simon, and he had seen him up in Chicago at the Rosemont Horizon a few weeks earlier. We went to see him in Cincinnati, and afterward we hung out, and there were maybe a dozen people, and the security guy says, no, he's gone, get out of here, he's gone. I said, he's not gone. But I said, he wouldn't care if we were here if Paul Simon had left. He's trying to shoot us off. So we stayed, we got his autograph, and Mike talked to Paul Simon and said, you know, I saw you a couple of weeks ago up in Chicago, and said the sound was much better tonight than it was there. He said there was an echo, and Paul Simon said, thank you for telling me that. He said, I'm going to tell that to my sound man. He was very appreciative. We saw, yeah, we got to tell the background story. One of the most surreal things. We went to see, well, again, it was a case of last minute. He wasn't going to go, and then he called me at the last minute and said, yeah, I'll go with you. We go to see Burt Backrack in Skokie, Illinois, and we got there really early. We're hanging out in the theater, and this woman showed us, actually, she unlocked the theater and took us on a tour, which was cool. We told her we came up from Indianapolis. So then we go get something to eat, we come back in, it's still really early, and I said, I'm gonna go get my box set of his music, because I think I can get his autograph. And Mike said, well, I'm sure he's already here. And I said, no, he isn't, because I just heard his personal secretary over there on her cell phone saying she's a little worried that he hadn't showed up yet. So I go out start out to the car down this hallway, and there at the end of the hallway is Burt Backrack looking like a lost kid. You know? And I said, hi, Mr. Backrack. He said, where's the theater? And I said, well, this is it. No, I mean, where's the theater? Where do I play? I said, well, I'll take you there. So I escorted him up and told him, you know, I was in Indianapolis a few months back when you broke her shoulder. And obviously you remember that. Anyway, we got up there, and when we rounded the corner, Mike's jaw just dropped. If I ever had a picture of something that I don't have a picture of, that would be the one. That look on his face, and he just slowly rose and went over there and shook Burt Backrack's hand. Then after the concert, we talked, the woman that had led us on the tour, she said, you know, he mentioned you guys during the sound check. He said that there were 2 guys from Indianapolis here. I had made acquaintance with one of his background singers when I saw him in Indianapolis, because she went to IU, and she mentioned the same thing when we talked to her. She said, yeah, he mentioned you guys, and then we got his autograph again as he was getting into his limo. That was one of the coolest days of my life. So let's add a couple things here. You know, Mike did these cousins comments of me and him, and these kind of dovetail with what we talked about. So this one doesn't, but I'll read it anyway. It says something about, I would say, I don't believe it. One day back in school, you got a spanky. I couldn't help it. He says, when I walked by the library, I felt the urge to let out a scream. There you go. And I said, was McCleary behind the punishment, our principal? He said, sure was. And he says, you might say he was the principal reason. And then it's got McCleary saying it's so good that you were able to make it, that so many were able to make it today. So Andy, thank you for that story. I mean, it's not bad, but let's see. Okay, here we go. We had another friend, John Mullen. Look at Code. I say, wow, where have you been? You look different. You remember I said I was serious about a hair transplant. Yeah, so he says there was a difference of opinion on where it should go, and they put the hair on the front of his face. Let's see. Oh, here, perfect. Pode, where you been? You'll never guess. He says, I've been to a place I rarely go, saw people I rarely see, and I saw the sights and hit the heights and conquered the unknown. You went to work? Yeah. Well, here's one where he has me saying what I wanted for Christmas. I want a new camera, so he knew even back in the 70s. John Mullen says, I'd like a basketball. Pode says to Santa, Hugh Hefner, please. Maybe one more. Then I'm gonna get a serious thing here. We'll leave it at that. Okay, I will turn things a little more serious. I will say, Mike lost his mother, and the girls lost their mother about a year and a half before Mike. And Mike was a trooper and stayed with her more than I think you guys, because he was able to, and really saw her through. And he told me around that time, just before she passed, he said, I feel closer to God really than I've ever felt in my life. He said that we read the Bible every day and have devotions and pray together. So I thought that was good. And then I have a poem, something Mike wrote, and this is going to reveal a little different side of Mike. I think it's an appropriate closing. The name of the poem is I Am. As I am sleeping, I am thinking of what I am to myself and what I am to others who might see me for what I am not. As I am sleeping, I am reading newspaper print in my mind of what has occurred in my life and the life of others. As I am sleeping, I am loving the people who are close to me for what they have done for me in making me whatever I am. As I am sleeping, I am dreaming of things that are pleasant to me, not of fame or monetary wealth, but of pleasure only people can provide. As I am sleeping, I am weeping for loss of friends and kin, for illness that plagues even the best of the children of God. As I am sleeping, I am talking a conversation with no one in sight, to be heard by no one but myself. The only opinion that counts is mine. As I am sleeping, I am laughing at humor my friends provide, enjoying the company of each other. Humor is a sign of love. As I am sleeping, I am praying for those who need help the most, for those who have taken life for granted. I pray as I am sleeping.
When did you write that?
Back in the 70s.
Ooh.
So,
For all of his humor, all of his, he was one of the kindest people I
Yes.
knew.
Yes.
and there you got the other side of Mike that a lot of people perhaps didn't see. So thank you for indulging me. I know you got a few laughs from that, and I appreciate that. And I know he would, even though he didn't want this kind of a ceremony. But thanks again for coming. And then is Bradley next? Or?
He probably wouldn't have come.
No way. No way.
Oh, I forgot to say, he said I could add that.
Hi, I'm Brad Moss, Jennifer's son, Deputy Mike. Just want to take everybody for him. So for somebody that wasn't a people person, he was for the people. He always did for everybody else over himself. Big part of my life. He taught me how to play baseball, ride my bike, basically anything, given me to be taught growing up. With that being said, I appreciate everything you did for me, for everybody else. there's anybody that can make a whole room laugh, it was him. You never knew what he had up his sleeve. Never knew what to expect from him. He'd always keep you on your toes. Anytime you were going through a rough time, he was there. Never once missed a baseball game, never once missed anything that I had going on with school or anything else. Never lost my best friend. I appreciate everything. Will you?
Well, I'm one of Mike's cousins on his mother's side, and appreciate hearing all those stories. Some of them, I didn't, many of them I didn't know. But he was a gentle and kind heart, and all of us loved him a great deal. We had a lot of fun out on the farm in those early days. I remember one thing, the Mike Show, we used to play the Mike Show, which he would have Knucklehead Smith, is that his name? Jerry Mahoney and Knucklehead Smith would be part of the Mike Show. But anyway, mostly what I remember is just his goodness, and his kindness, and his gentleness, and just wanted to share a prayer with all of you, if I could, please. Holy One, we ask for your blessing about our time here together, to remember Mike before you, and to celebrate his life. Thank you for his kindness, his gentleness, his generosity. Help us to feel your presence here now and always. We ask that you take care of each of us according to our needs, and strengthen us to watch over one another, especially over Vicki and Deb and Jennifer and their families. We thank you for all of these things deep in our hearts, and help us to go and live our lives with wonderful memories and peace and love for one another. In his holy name we pray, amen. Thank you.
Coming into my fashion, we decided to sing Roslyn's Pizza today because I was his hangout at least 3 to 4 times a week. We were talking up there. So if you haven't had a chance to enjoy a slice of pizza in honor of him, we also have cake and some cookies that were made, some Cincinnati breads, and they were really good things for you to look at. So feel free just to take some time to mingle and to look at the pictures of him as we all remember a life well lived.